Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the Ultra hardware. This is their part number 44236. This is a commercial entrance lock. This is, and I have all the contents taken out of the box, this is a grade 2 cylindrical lock is what this is. This would be called an office function. They call it entry. It's not an entry function. Well, is it? No, this is an office function. The proper term for an entry function is where you have, well, when someone says entry, I'm thinking a triple function lock, a passage, an office, and then a storeroom lock. Meaning I can push the button and turn it. When the button's popped out, it's always unlocked. That's a passage, function 1. When I push the button in, it's locked until somebody rotates that inside lever or that retracting hub gets pushed in. Now, whether or not the latch bolt governs that needs to be determined. Okay, it does not. Okay, so when that inside knob is turned, now it's unlocked. That's function 2. That's an office function. Function 3 is a storeroom. It's always locked. Inserting the key, now here's the trick. Inserting the key and turning it, it does unlock it. Okay? So this is an office function. This does not operate as an entrance because it doesn't stay locked when you push turn, because there is no turn function on this. Well, actually, that button just turned. Oh, okay, it did turn. This is an entrance function. Okay, so the portion that's a bit odd is the fact that it's awfully difficult to turn that button. You can turn it. That should be a raised area on that. So I would not prefer that, to be honest. I wouldn't prefer it. I'm not sure what the plan is, how to easily move that back and forth. But it does operate that way, where it will stay locked. So, with the exception that this push button appears to be it's poorly designed at a minimum, it will operate as an entrance function, or entry. Okay, so there we go. Grade 2, that means that this has been tested to 500,000 cycles, 500,000 cycles. Seems like a decent quality lock. You know, this is an average, typical and common imported lock from Asia. Ultra hardware, that's what they do. But, to say it fully and completely, that's all they do means they're a good outfit at doing that, is the bottom line. So in many instances, this would be a very nice lock in the sense of requiring a knob lock for whatever the application, residential, light-duty, commercial. It's obviously not handicap compliant because it's a knob. It might be a little bit too good of quality to use for just construction lockup doors. I might opt for a grade 3 lock from Ultra for that. But when someone wants a knob lock, and they want it to be of decent quality, and they want it to be stainless steel, this lock hits all of that material, hits all of those specifications. I have a client who rebuilds, I'm not sure of their entire business, they're in Chicago, they rebuild crane cabs. Amongst other things that they do, they refit crane cabs, and we provide them very unusual doors, very unusual frames, and they always want a stainless knob lock. This lock fits that bill perfectly. They don't want to spend a ton of money on it. They're just, refitting the crane cab. And this is the kind of lock that works well for that. Okay. Cylindrical construction. This is just a ball style knob. Okay. Reasonably attractive knob. Give you an idea of the diameter of the knob. About 2-inch diameter. Projection from the face of the door, depending where you thread the rows, naturally. Almost 3-inch, about 2 7/8 or so. Okay. So we're going to, in no particular order, go over this lock completely. The first thing I'd like to do is show you how to reverse the cylinder. Now, what you want to have is when you install the key, you want to have the teeth pointed up. That is really not necessarily the fact that you want the teeth pointed up, but what you want is the springs in the Bible to be pushing the pins down. And it's literally called a Bible in the cylinder. And I'm going to show you that now. In order to remove this knob, you need a tool. This lock and all do. They will include that tool for reversing or removing the knob trim. This little knob removal tool. The rest of the package has 8 screws in it, which we'll go over in just a few. So when this lock is unlocked, you have access to the slot right there that will allow you to pull the knob off. You don't need the key to do that with this lock. Actually, you probably do. Let's take a look. Yeah, you do. So here's the bottom line. You have to insert the key. You have to rotate the key 90-degree clockwise. That would be good. You have to rotate. So it's a bit of a gymnastic feat here. What I would do first is I would rotate the knob to get access to that locking tab. When you get access to that locking tab, I would hold it in place there. I would then rotate my key 90 degree. I would insert my tool. It depresses the tab, allowing you to pull that off. So why was I able to do that? How did I know to do one than the other? Just, doing it countless times, really. So at this point, we need to get the inner rose off the back of the knob to rotate the... Well, actually, at this point, if all we're doing is rotating the handing of the lock, we don't need to do anything other than it was set up this way before we took it apart. Teeth are up. The retracting hub is on this side, so this would work very well for a left-hand door. This would work very well for a right-hand reverse door. But if you had an application where you needed the retracting hub to be on the other side, well, now you need to take that off and turn it over and move it back. Turn that knob 180 degrees over, and that cylinder is falling inside of there. That's normal, but I think you get the picture. It's exactly where it does need to be. Okay, so what you would do is, that's exactly what you do. Knob comes off, turn it over 180 degrees, the knob that is, or the chassis that is, actually the chassis, then put the thing back together. Okay, now in order to get to the cylinder, I'd like to demonstrate, show you the cylinder if you needed to rekey this. And in order to do that, I'm going to need a little bit of a tool to get that off, so excuse me. Just a small center punch. The tool that comes with it is not really going to allow you to get that pulled off. But a small center punch, or some sort of small yet durable tool. You just want to get your tool inside of this lip here and just easily pry the escutcheon off with the inside rose. And actually, this tool might be a bit too large. I just didn't want to walk over to my locksmith bench. Is what's happening right here, right now. And it looks like I'm going to have to. So let's pause this video. Okay, a bit more of an appropriate tool here, a little bit thinner. Give me more leverage as well. Just get that safely underneath there. And just pull that back a little bit. And once you do, you'll be able to get that tool underneath the head of that ring ever so slightly. At least that's the plan. They do pressure fit them in there pretty tight usually. And really the hard part is doing it without, damaging any of the hardware. It is unfortunately true that locks that cost less, and in particular Asian imported locks, they simply do not go together, fit together, even though they are engineered together, as well as a lock that's going to cost substantially more money. That's obviously easy to understand, but you do need to be a bit more delicate with it. Like the knowledge of what it took to take the knob off, that's It's generally not going to be the case with other locks, and it's not Ultra. It's every company who imports low-cost locks from overseas. So we're able to get that off. It's not a trouble. It's not a challenge. But what I'm saying is it doesn't come apart like a $400 lock. Well, as you can imagine. So that's the cylinder. And I used the word Bible earlier. That is literally the portion of the cylinder, this raised portion where the springs are. And that is because I had mentioned you want the teeth up, but what you really want are the springs in the Bible pointed down, pushing the pins down. If you installed it upside down, the lock is still going to work. But now you have the weight of the springs literally resting on, the weight of the pins resting on the springs. Sounds like no big deal. You're right. Until about 10 years down the road, when those springs have fatigued to the point where you're really not getting good, what would be called positive locking, when the spring is pushing the pin down into the chamber. You'll have negative locking all the time, and it does happen. So the way that we do it here is springs are towards the top. In Europe and other places where they use profile cylinders, they kind of look like a keyhole, like a skeleton keyhole is what the profile of a profile cylinder looks like, or a Euro cylinder. They are literally like this. It does, in fact, quite very much look like this. They don't see a problem with that sort of design, and I think they write off the commentary about the springs fatiguing completely. However, I have actually seen, I've repinned Euro cylinders, and I thought, well, the key doesn't work. The key works intermittently at best. It does not work every single time. And I discovered, well, it works really great when the springs are up here, not so much here, because those pins are hanging down. Okay, so let's move on. If you were to rekey this, it's a simple matter at this point. You'll pull that C-clip off with the same tool. You'll be able to put that 6-pin length blank in there, and you'll be able to do what you need to do. So this is definitely a 6-pin length cylinder, and we're going to conclude that it's also pinned 6. So it's drilled for 6 chambers. We'll conclude that all 6 of those chambers are filled as well. And what I mean to say is if one wasn't, you will find cylinders that are drilled 6-pin but only pinned 5. The fact that this is cut to 6 tells me that they're certainly all chambers are populated with springs and pins. This is what's called a direct code. That means that the stamping that's on here, 139713, is actually, according to the manufacturer's depth and spacing data, you could measure this key blank and come up with that code using the depth and spacing data. So it's a direct code. High security cylinders will never, never, never have direct codes. They'll either have blind codes or indirect codes. So that you can't just easily, someone with a little bit of knowledge, kind of look at that key and say, okay, I can replicate that key. So that's not the case on anything high security. So what we'll do is we'll put this back together. The cylinder goes in. You want the plug of the cylinder to fit back in the hole, otherwise you won't get the inside knob rows on. Okay, got that in there. Going to bring that back down. Just carefully seat that. When you're dealing with small tools, sharp instruments, sharp hardware, it's not unheard of to get some tool somewhere where you don't want it to go. So we'll set this back together as a right hand, just more common. I think right hand, doors dominate. There's probably 6 out of 10 doors might be right-handed, so we'll put it back that way. Teeth are up. The retracting hub is on the side that will permit a right-hand door to work. Get that pushed back together. And what you'll do is you'll just push it to the point where it... Okay, so with this lock, it literally clipped back together. There was no reason to have to turn anything. What happened was the... Okay, yeah, that worked just fine. What happened was the C-clip was depressed by the stem of the knob being pushed back down. However, I want to illustrate what I was talking about earlier. So that C-clip is right there. It's shaped like a C, except that it's on this side. Tiny little hole. Well, here, let's do this. The C-clip will... won't be able to easily do it. There is an item, the item, that is right here. You see that little hole? Well, that C goes all the way around there and there. When you insert the tool into the hole and push, it will depress that C-clip, allowing it to pull back. Okay. The reason that you have security with a lock like this is that unless the door is unlocked, you can't rotate the knob to move the stem into the position to depress that C-clip. If you don't have the key to remove it, that plus sign, okay? There's your tailpiece coming out of the back of the knob. It's flat. It's horizontal. That C-clip sits here. Unless you can rotate the key in the cylinder, the C-clip won't have enough room to move when it's depressed, allowing the C-clip to come out of the slot that is in the stem of the lock, which is, right down here. So that's frankly why that works. That's why you need a key to remove the trim. And what we'll do now is we'll put this together. We're putting it together as a right hand. Okay. So I've got the key stuck in there. It's a nice little handle, I suppose. But again, with this, you don't need anything to put it back together, because as I push, actually, this lock does not actually require you to have the key, because if that was the case, yeah, it certainly does. So what's happening here? Let's back up. When I'm able to push that knob down onto the stem, the tailpiece is there, but it's a bit tapered at the end. And as it enters the plus sign, the stem of the knob assembly gets to the point where the C-clip can pop back out into its slot. But because that tailpiece is tapered, there's just enough room for it to move in, and then as you push it down, it will pop into the slot. The tailpiece is in the plus sign in the horizontal position. Anyway, a study of the lock would eventually give you that knowledge. So, right hand, and that's that. Okay, now let's take a look at the included parts. Obviously, two Schlage look-alike style keys. The Schlage C keyway is likely the second most common key blank ever of all time, at least in North America, I'd imagine. The Kwikset 1176 might be the most common of all time. So, 6-pin Schlage look-alike C keyway. Now, I did find that, and this is very true of imported locks as well, when I took an original Schlage 6-pin blank in another Kwikset lock, yesterday, in fact, the key did not go into that cylinder broaching very well. It did not go in very well. That's not hard to believe. So be mindful. Using original equipment on this, like that key blank, might prove to be a challenge. You may need to be mindful of purchasing original Schlage blanks. I've not tried a third party or an OEM manufacturer like Kaba Ilko or others. And generally, and while it's not considered best practice, I have in the past had that where I've taken my file and just taken off a few passes off of each side, and I'm just thinning the blank ever so slightly. You're dealing with non-original equipment made to an original equipment manufacturer's, made to an original manufacturer's specifications. but they're not going to be exact is the bottom line. And that's why this is an inexpensive lock. So you get the 2 keys. You get, obviously, the next most important part is the latch bolt. Now, what separates this lock from others is that this is a lock that is permissible for use on fire doors. Okay, you have to be mindful if you are working on a fire-rated door, you're going to need to be sure that the lock also is not only listed, it's been tested, it is found to be in compliance with the requirements of the fire test, but that it's also labeled. So listed means there's a listing at the testing laboratory that says the lock's been tested and it works, it's passed, but it has to be visually labeled. And in most instances, I think in all instances really, you will see the evidence of that on the face of the latch bolt. Okay, you've got the UL, you've got C, you've got US, right? The other thing you have here is a capital letter F. There's a lowercase f and a capital letter F. That's obvious. However, what's the difference in this context? A lowercase f would be neutral pressure. Uppercase F would be positive pressure in the test criteria. So an uppercase F will be very typical and common for you to see. And older locks, before positive pressure testing was standard, you'll see lowercase Fs all the time. And that's, fun fact, that's what that means. So this is 2 3/4 only. This has a sleeve that you'll probably leave on here. If you've drilled the door with a 1-inch hole in the edge, you'll leave that sleeve. If you've drilled it for a 7/8 hole, you'll want to take that sleeve off. It'll work just the same, meaning if you have a wood fire door. If it's a hollow metal door, you're certainly going to leave that right on in place. Again, 2 3/4 only. No option for 2 3/8 to adjust this to. There may be 2 3/8 available latches for this lock, and we can take a look at that actually in a moment. You're going to get a 4 7/8 strike. This is a strike plate that is literally 4 7/8 of an inch tall. Okay. It is about 1 13, maybe 1 7/8 wide. Maybe 1 13/16. That's not the width of the strike, though. Strikes are measured from the center line of the screw hole to the edge of the lip, which is about 1 5/16, which is normal. 1 1/4 lip length, plus or minus, is the Swiss Army knife size when it comes to lip lengths on strikes. They seem to work in almost all instances, but they will not work in all. If you had a pair of hollow metal doors with a astragal applied to the face of the active door on the pull side, and no accommodation in a slot for the lip of the strike to project out, yeah, you're going to need a lip length of 7/8. 7/8 is 1/2 inch and 3/4, assuming 1 3/4 thick doors. If you had an inset on your door of 1 1/4, you're definitely going to need a longer length lip. If your door was moved into the frame, or if you had jam extensions applied, or very thick brick mold or casing, you'll need a longer lip. And we can help you with those shorter lips and those longer lip length strikes as well. This is made of stainless. That's obvious by what the metal looks like on the back, and of course my magnet will attest to it being at least non-ferrous. You're going to get a dust box. This has no relevance to that 4 7/8 strike. This would be used for a 2 3/4 T strike. Why it's in there, don't know. It shouldn't be in there. If they're going to put a dust box in there, they need to put the right one in there. And actually, we're going to go over the installation instructions, which are in the box. Okay, they do not refer to the dust box in the installation instructions. Okay, that's good. Which means you can not install this and still have a fire-rated assembly. The point of that is, to have a fire-rated assembly, you need to follow the installation instructions. The dust box isn't on there. You will get that package of screws and that release tool. You're going to have 2 screws for the strike, 2 for the latch, 2 for the lock. Very simple. There are other imported locks that have more screws in them. They want you to screw it together more times. That's generally lever locks every time that I see those. Just in my opinion, a slightly overcomplicated design, but there you go. So what we'll do now is let's just quickly talk about how to install this, and then we're going to look at the installation instructions and see how well we did. So we're going to do it backwards to the correct way. However, this is a knob lock, really simple. So your knob release tool you can see that spring-loaded tab in there. That knob will then come off. Okay, it's right there in the hole there. This entire assembly will then come off. There are two pieces that are in here. There's the rosette, but then the mounting plate that you can remove from here by depressing that spring and then just kind of pulling it out. And that's what it looks like. Be mindful the spring needs to be projecting out in order for that to work. Got a couple of holes here. You're going to want to install that wherever you want that spring. I would imagine you're going to want it towards the, I'd probably put it towards the latch side of the door. The point of the matter is it can go on either way, this way or this way. We'll see what the installation instructions say. Yeah, I might be tempted to put it on the latch side because that's the side that I might be looking at more often. There are two holes drilled and tapped at 12 and 6, and into these two holes, there and there, is where those machine screws will go into. So this will go into the door, the plate will come in, the two screws will go in. No need to excessively over-tighten that. There's just no need. There are small little ridges on this plate, and the underside of the screws probably have ridges as well, and they do. That will kind of give you the concept of it click, 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 tightening, and then it'll get to the point where like, okay, don't go any further. You don't want to compress that lock because it's going to prevent it from working freely. It needs to be hand tight, that's all. Now, before you get to any of that, we did skip over an important subject. See that little prong right there? There's another one right here. Those are generally installed at 3 and 9 o'clock. At 3 and 9 o'clock. Okay? That threaded rosette needs to be threaded so that you're from the edge of the door, from the face of the door to the center of the retracting hub is the center of the thickness. You need this dimension to be half of the door thickness from here to the center. So if it's an 1 3/4 thick door, it's 1 7/8. Rotate that to the point where it's in the right spot. Put your tangs at 12 and 6, like they are. Then this goes in, then the plate comes on, then the two screws go in. Then your rose, then your knob. Okay? You don't want to put the latch in, put the chassis, and then try to rotate this to adjust it. You have to adjust it first because those prongs, which are meant to bite into the face of a wood door or a fiberglass door, and if it's a metal-clad door or a steel door, it will literally have little semicircle cutouts at the 3 and 9 o'clock position to accept the prong on this. Okay, it's just an anti-rotation device is all it is. So you'll set that first, and then as we went through that a little quickly, the plate, the two screws, there's a small notch right there, and that's for the spring. And you're going to force that spring to go back right through there. Just clip it together, and now that spring is where it belongs. Depressing that spring will allow you to pull that off. Then, of course, where the slot is in the stem, right there, that little slot, that needs to coincide with where the tab is, the spring-loaded tab, which is here. You also see this indentation right here. You see this little slot here. Those go together. All I had to do is push it on. You always want to pull on the knob. Literally twist it and pull on it to make sure it's seated. You don't want the trim to come off in your hand at some other date because you've not seated it properly. This lock is put back together the way we want it to be. Now we're going to switch to the screen view and take a look at the installation instructions. Okay, so this is the item that we're looking at here, the 44236. Extended description information down below. Cylindrical ball lock set, stainless steel, commercial grade 2, again a 500,000 cycle. The entry function, we went over that. It's UL listed, that's indicated. SC4, 2 3/4 back set, ASA strike. Let's take a look at that option for a longer latch bolt. So what I'm doing is pulling up the catalog and then going to do a find function on my keyboard for 44236. I'm going to get to the page where I can find this lock. be mindful. They say US 32 here. This is not US 32. That would be polished stainless. This is US 32D for satin stainless. None of these are polished. Now, in terms of latch bolts, so what we're doing is we're searching the catalog for options on this latch bolt. They do not list a 2 3/8 on this grade 2 at all. In addition to that, as we scroll through the catalog, we leave the lock section completely. So, you know, we need to conclude that it's just simply not available because it's not listed. The truth of the matter is this is a very generic design, and it's very, very likely that another latch bolt, especially Arrow or possibly Schlage, will work in this lock. The problem with doing that is it's certainly no longer fire rated, so you want to be mindful about making such a change on a fire rated door. Okay. Now, if you need a 2 3/8 latch for this and it's not fire rated, reach out to us. We will assist in locating something that will work. So back to our product. 6 pins keyed to the Schlage the easy code by Ilco, or Kaba Ilco, is SC4. It's just a 6-pin Schlage C keyway. You can insert into it other cylinder types as well, because that's a very generic composite style construction on that cylinder. You could very likely order, you know, they have ASA and Medico mentioned here, 2 high security cylinder platforms, Schlage as well, Arrow as well. Marx, I believe, had a cylinder called Scorpion that was available under it. I think it's Marx, or that might have been PDQ. But the point is, high security cylinders will work in here because of the generic design. 1 3/8 to 1 3/4 door thickness range. Sleeve collar latch bolt option for use on metal doors. We demonstrated that. Leave it on there unless it doesn't fit, then pull it off. Zinc dichromate for corrosion resistance. Stainless steel knob is what this is. 3-inch rose. Yeah, probably. I'm going to put my tape measure on it and verify. Yeah, I'd say that'd be a 3-inch rose. Maybe a 1/8 of an inch shy of that. Threaded inside and out are the rosettes for a standard 2 1/8 inch hole with a 1/2 inch throw latch bolt. Dead locking latch bolt with a 1/2 inch throw. You want to be mindful to look at your label on your door. Every label on every fire door is going to have an indication of minimum latch throw. And here's a great example of a label. Okay, so it says right here, 1/2 inch min latch bolt throw, 1/2 inch for single and 3/4 inch for pairs of doors. So if your label said, you know, 3/4 inch for pairs of doors, and you were using this on a pair of doors, this would not work at all. And in fact, Ultra does not have a lock for that. But as long as it says 1/2 inch and you're using it in that application, this would be perfect. Panic-proof mechanism, I think what they're meaning is it's always available for emergency egress. You can always turn that knob on the inside and exit immediately. Furnished with the 1 1/8 wide faceplate on the latch. It's 2 1/4 by 1 1/8 wide. And then the 4 7/8 ASA strike for the jam. Okay. Now let's switch over to the installation instructions, which are here. Okay, so this link to the installation instructions is down below this video. And we'll go through this quickly. This video won't include a dissertation on how to prep a steel door or a wood door or fiberglass door or whatever you're installing this onto, metal clad. But be mindful, if you need assistance doing that, call with your order number, and I will be happy to walk you through the process. The template is listed literally down below at the bottom of the installation instructions. So you're obviously not going to use 2 3/8 with this. It's just the bottom line. In fact, it obviously shouldn't even be referred to there since there is no 2 3/8 latch. So don't drill in the wrong location, naturally. After you have the door marked and prepped, install your latch bolt. That's the next thing. You can put the strike into the frame at any time that you like. We've discussed removing the inside trim. We've demonstrated that. We've demonstrated adjusting the exterior threaded rows so the center line of the retracting hub, well, of the, you know, I would say of the retracting hub, is where that needs to be. Maybe the center line of the chassis is not too terribly far off. And, you know, looking at the, yeah, it would be I would say the center line of the chassis is where I would want to be on that. Now, as we continue to move through, installing the lock. Once that latch is in the door, you're going to need to make sure that the latch bolt engages the outside of the chassis and the retracting hub correctly. So before you put your inside trim on, obviously the latch will be in. You're going to remove the inside trim, adjust the outside, then bring all of this through the hole in the door and engage the latch bolt. It needs to be engaged properly. These two little small features to the drawing here and here is to be the outside of the chassis. They need to allow you to get the T portion inside of the retracting hub. Forgive me, this is the retracting hub here. That needs to get inside of those slots. Okay, the portion here will rest on the outside of the chassis. After you have that secure and you know that it works, like hold the lock on the door and operate it to make sure it does work. Then you'll get that inside mounting plate, the two screws, position that spring, and then bring your inside rosette over it. Slide your knob down as we demonstrated. We did go over changing the hand of the lock. Should you need to, go right ahead. In fact, it might be easier to do that once it's already installed on the door. It is a bit easier to do that because it's one less hand that you need, so to speak. And if you need help doing that, or there are times, not always, but there are times that we can hand the lock for you, indicate this is not the item that we are looking at. Ship this as a left-hand reverse, whatever the case might be. Okay, and we can't always do that if possible, that kind of thing. But we'll do it if we can. Meaning, if we have the inventory here, that's where we'll be. So, installation instructions. Then your template. This portion down here doesn't apply because you do not have an adjustable latch. Okay, that wraps up the installation instruction portion of the video. Let's switch back to the camera view and wrap up this video. Before we do that, actually, the link to the manufacturer's page here. This link will show you not only all of the Ultra hardware that we sell, but also it will bring you to the manufacturer's website via this link, and then the entire product catalog that I jumped into earlier. If you are a commercial customer, I would suggest that you review their exit devices. Very good quality in their exit devices. If you are a residential customer, I would suggest that you review their cabinet hardware, which is here somewhere. There we go. Really nice quality, nice fit and finish, of really good value on their cabinet hardware. Let's wrap up this video now on camera. Now, in conclusion, nice quality lock. I would not hesitate to use it. I wouldn't hesitate to suggest that you use it. Be mindful to use it in the right application. I literally had a client order imported lever locks that were grade 1, a million cycle, in fact. This is a grade 2 lock, 500,000 cycle, and they used them on a college campus. Well, about 6 months after the original installation, they did indeed start to have failure of the locks. 1 or 2 of them were giving trouble, and interestingly, on the same door. No replacement parts when you're dealing with imported locks. No chance for that at all. There is no parts drawings, no manuals, no technical support. And the moral of the story was, just because the lock is a grade 1 lock, that does not mean that it's appropriate for use in an application that, while it might be a million cycle, a grade 1 lock, doesn't mean it's appropriate for a college campus. The moral of the story is, use this lock where it makes sense. It's normal, standard, adult use, this is going to be just fine. Light duty commercial, residential work, it's going to be great. If you have abusive work, abusive handling of the lock, vandalism, any lock will break. But the problem with locks that are imported, you don't have a chance to get replacement parts. And they're usually manufactured in such a way, not always, but they're generally manufactured in such a way that many of those component parts aren't actually replaceable, even if they were available. So be mindful where you use this. That crane cab, where the usage a day is, it could be as little as 2 times a day or 4 times a day, in, out, for lunch break, that sort of thing. So be mindful of where you use it. I think it'll be a great lock in many instances, but I would not specify this in an application that would have high volume, but volume, even if it's low volume, that borders on vandalism. You're going to need something manufactured to handle that. This lock isn't, but this lock is great in many other respects. Any questions on the Ultra Hardware 44236 entrance function, knob lock, or any other Ultra Hardware product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.